Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a meta deep dive, tier list analysis, and of course breaking down all of the big happenings in Endgame for the big transition from patch 1.0 to 1.1. We've seen some pretty major changes and I think it's high time we talk about it, but first and foremost let's cover what adjusted from the previous patch to this patch and how it's impacted things overall, because I think a lot of the online resources aren't quite up to speed just yet on some of the big movements that have happened in game and that we're seeing on the ground level here. So in the endgame, Memory of Chaos, where it all counts, we've seen a brand new slew of enemies added to that game mode. And those enemies are no joke. We've also seen a brand new buff and a removal of the old buff. The old buff favored Hunt and Erudition characters, granting them a massive amount of speed and damage, and warped the meta around Hunt and Erudition characters massively. The new buff is entirely defensive focused, with some offensive ones coming down the line, but seems to focus more on nihility, debuffing, and characters that are able to mess around with enemies. So no longer do we have an unconditional damage and speed buff, we instead have a conditional sustained / damaging buff, which isn't always up. And that's a big deal when it comes to the meta, and I don't think we've seen the results of that change really reflected on too many things just yet. But it's fair to say a lot of players are definitely seeing some pretty big changes in game. Now in this video, we're going to pick on a few characters which are hot topics in the community and discuss them at length and whether or not they still deserve their positions on all these tier lists, and also break down how much they're being used, how they're being used, and what their future prospects are. We'll also be touching on Silver Wolf and her massively high placement on every tier list and whether or not that's justified. But the first one on the chopping block here, which I've been dying to talk about, is Jing Yuan. So Jing Yuan is a character who has seen a pretty mixed reception, going from being overhyped on his first release all the way up until when he came out, and then people had a big kind of glass shattering moment where they realized he wasn't maybe as good as he was hyped up to be, and then now people are kind of in the middle somewhere. Now I wanted to kind of chime in and talk a little bit about him because I think he, without the buff, is definitely significantly weaker, but built correctly is actually still very much a complete powerhouse. Now in order to actually see this in action here, we're going to use a new feature on the Pride website, which actually displays a ton of data about how much characters are used in Memory of Chaos right now. Now what's cool about this data is it's a reasonably large sample size coming from over 1,500 players almost, which means we get a pretty good idea of how much a character is represented. Now it's worth noting that this data is definitely biased towards more hardcore players because those are the kind of players who are going to be submitting data online. I don't think a casual player is going to submit that to a website, so it's definitely biased to people who are more likely to pull and more likely to play, at the highest level. So in the hands of more experienced players, we can see that Jing Yuan is absolutely the second most played damaging character by not a little bit, but a landslide. And when we take a look at the actual most played teams in Memory of Chaos 10 with 3 stars, you can see that he's pretty much 100% represented on one of the sides almost. It is crazy. We've got a few Sovals in here, but for the most part, the meta right now is Jing plus Seele. It is just that. So I think it's pretty interesting that he gets such a bad rap despite having such a good performance. And it's pretty interesting as well when you actually dive into the Jing data here and kind of what people are using on him here. You'd think, okay, these guys all have E6 or something like that. And some people do have E6, but the majority of players are using E0 or E1 Jing. And overall, that's definitely pretty interesting. And 30% of them aren't even using his signature light cone. So I think Jing Yuan is definitely a very competitive character, and even though people give him a pretty tough time, I think he is actually very powerful. He just requires a certain amount to work. Now what is that amount to work? Well, my Jing Yuan right now has a pretty decent amount of critical strike rating. I can show you guys what that looks like, and the way I've built him definitely feels pretty strong. I was able to get 30 out of 30 stars in Memory of Chaos, and I felt like there was definitely a lot of wiggle room there. I think the main and most important thing on Jing is to get about 134 speed to 140 speed. That definitely feels very important. Getting roughly 40 to 50% crit and a good amount of crit damage while also maintaining some attack on him as well is also very, very important. important, I think. Namely, the crit. If you don't have the crit, he's definitely going to feel a bit bumpy, in my opinion. Of course, having traces, namely his talent leveled up, is also very important. If you don't have those things, your Jing is definitely going to struggle. Now, in terms of team compositions, this is also very, very important for Jing. If you don't pair him with the correct supports, he's definitely going to struggle. And the main support you need to pair him with is Ting Yun. If you don't pair Ting Yun with him, he's going to have a pretty tough time. And the reason for that is that he is missing energy in his rotation. And if you're not giving him that energy, well, he's going to have a pretty challenging one of it. Of course, you can also pair him with a pretty unsuspecting character from my perspective, and that is Bronya. Now, I was pretty opposed to the idea of using Bronya with Jing. Part of that was just because I felt Bronya was so strong with Seele, but absolutely because of the release of Silver Wolf, which we'll get into in a second here, you can kind of use Bronya elsewhere now. And a big powerful team that is popping up is this one here, which is actually the one I used personally, which is Jing, Bronya, Ting Yun, and Bailu, or another healer. This could be Luocha, this could be Natasha, it could be Japad, or March 7th, whatever you want. But overall, this is a character kind of team, which definitely feels like it's a bit of a powerhouse. Now, you don't need to use both of these Harmony characters by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that is definitely popping up more and more, and I'm starting to use myself, and it is very strong. So I think Jing Yuan is an exceptional character, and I'm not entirely sure why he gets such a bad rap. Even without the signature light cone, I think he is still fully capable of achieving the 30 out of 30 on his designated side if he is built correctly. Obviously, the light cone is incredibly powerful for him, but I don't think it's necessary. So I think Jing, despite getting the bad rap he does, is a very good unit, and he's definitely deserved of his S tier placement here. Now, the next one I wanted to discuss a little bit more is Seele. So Seele is a character which a lot of people theorize was very powerful just because of her ability to, you know, kind of take advantage of the situation she was put in. The hunt buff, the fact that none of the enemies really could revive. People were thinking she was going to fall off real hard as soon as we got into Memory of Chaos 1.1 with the reviving enemies, you know, with less quantum weak enemies, and, you know, with all sorts of stuff going on like that. And that just definitely doesn't seem to be the case. She is one of the most played units right now, and she definitely feels like one of the strongest characters in the game when it comes to DPS. And the reason for that is that she is still fully able to brute force a lot of the encounters in the game. And what I mean by that is that she is able to go up against enemies that are not quantum weak and absolutely blast them, provided she has the correct support she needs. Now, the introduction of Silver Wolf has also massively made Seele more powerful. If you pair these characters together, they get way stronger as they are both quantum and kind of feed off each other synergistically. But I think Seele is kind of going to remain in her position as that kind of go-to damage dealer, and she does seem to kind of remain. If you take a look at pretty much all of the different star stages here, so you got 10 Seele everywhere, you know, 9 Seele everywhere, 8 Seele everywhere. She kind of is that overwhelmingly overused, overpowered kind of character. So I don't think she's moving anytime soon from that S+ ranking, unless there's another character that can deal as much single target damage as her, while also having as much AoE potential as her, and of course all the defensive penetration that she has as well. So overall, a spectacular unit with a spectacular typing, and I don't think that she fell off anywhere near as hard or really at all compared to what people were thinking she might have. So she's definitely probably going to be sticking around that position for what looks like probably the foreseeable future, at least with what we've got going on right now here. So let's move on to a character now that kind of has seen a pretty big fall off relative to the other two units that we've been talking about here, and that is the hunt character Yanqing. So Yanqing was definitely incredibly powerful in 1.0, and he is definitely still very strong now with a ton of ice weak enemies, as well as a big demand for crowd control to limit what an enemy can do. However, he definitely has seen a bit of a reduction in his power in order to get the higher amounts of stars which people are coveting and after to, you know, complete their endgame journey. And the reason for that is that he doesn't really have a good way to interact with a large amount of enemies, and the more enemies there are, the higher chance he is going to have to be hit. Even if you have a taunt, even if you have shields, there is a higher chance that he will eventually get hit and lose some of his momentum. So he really does struggle in the AoE department without getting that extra turn that he was getting in the last Memory of Chaos, and without getting that extra damage. So he is really lacking mobility, kind of ability to hit multiple enemies, and that does hurt him. Now, you can do multiple things to save him from this fate. You can pair him with another character that is capable of AoE. I've seen him paired with supports that are capable of AoE, as well as tanks that are capable of AoE, namely Clara and Trailblazer Fire are pretty good options as well. But the main thing I've seen people do on Yanqing is build him with a copious amount of speed. Now, the question is he still worthy of the S tier if he's got such a big issue and a glaring problem, that being purely single target? Well, I don't think that he's as weak as Dan Heng. Dan Heng's certainly not weak by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's stronger than Dan Heng, especially stronger than someone like Hook, but I don't think he's as strong as Jing Yuan. So I definitely feel like he's in kind of like this limbo here, in between S and A on this tier list specifically here, and he definitely does feel like he isn't being picked as much, even though he is still being picked as a damaging unit. And I definitely think that his kind of larger flaws of being purely a single target are definitely highlighted due to the kind of transition from patch 1.0 to 1.1 here. So definitely a bit of an interesting state for Yanqing. Still very nice unit. I'm very keen to be building more teams with him, but definitely has fallen off a little bit relative compared to Seele and Jing Yuan. He can be fixed though with building a large amount of speed. It's worth noting that. Now the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the 1 DPS meta that we find ourselves in. Now I theorized, and many others did, that this was a product of the first 1.0 clears, the buff that we had, and all sorts of stuff like that. And we were all kind of suspecting that, okay, we're going to end up using multiple DPSs moving forward. It's not going to be a problem. That's kind of going to be how it goes. But now that we're kind of a little bit further into the game's lifespan here, we're seeing that the 1 DPS compositions are pretty much here to stay, it seems like. If we go through all the stages here, you can see that for the most part, the most used teams are all 1 DPS comps. Now, that could be a product of the Jing Yuan and Seele meta just being so damn strong, and, buffing them up is only going to be, kind of the way to go. But honestly, with the damage dealers coming out and, kind of like the preliminary information that we have on them from CBT2, as well as some internet information, I honestly don't see this 1 damage meta changing anytime soon. And it's not like the other characters are unviable, it just seems that some characters just have a little bit more of an edge. Now, that is pretty interesting though, in my opinion, because the large majority of characters in this game, in terms of paths and the characters that are being designed and released, and among other things, are actually damage related. We've got Hunt, Erudition, Nihility, and Destruction, 4 out of 7 paths, all contributing damage dealers to the mix. And I think as we get more and more damage dealers, if you only need 1, this is going to create a pretty interesting scenario in terms of a meta. And it's no coincidence that damage dealers have the most characters in the lower tiers on these tier lists compared to supports and defensive supports. And I think it's pretty fascinating, and I'd much rather see a bigger emphasis on bringing more damage dealers in the future. And I think if we could kind of reach a meta where that is, we'd probably be in a much healthier position. Now, it's worth noting this isn't a rule that has to be followed. Now, while a lot of people consider the 1 DPS meta to kind of be the efficient way to go, I have seen multiple clears using 2 and even 3 DPSs in a single clear. Now, granted, those didn't have the 30 out of 30 star requirements filled, but I have seen players use all of only the base non-gacha characters and defeat Memory of Chaos 10, and that does bode pretty well for the flexibility of team building. Alright, so what does all this information teach us? Well, if the current meta kind of continues in the way it's been going, it kind of feels like you're wanting a very specific thing from your DPS, and that thing is big or reasonable single target damage with high damage multipliers, an ability to deal with AoE scenarios, namely clearing out trash mobs and contributing to 0 cycle wave 1s in Memory of Chaos, and also having some form of gimmick, whether that be the Lightning Lord, whether that be Resurgence, or kind of extra edge. And that definitely feels like it is exactly what Seele and Jing have, and it's why they have a stranglehold on the meta right now. Now, Yanqing is definitely a pretty reasonable character as well, but you saw his play rates the same as me, they're nowhere near as close. Now, some characters which I have actually seen have some pretty good power levels in terms of what we just discussed here, and kind of pull off a similar sweeping motion to Seele and Jing is actually Himiko, surprisingly, as well as QQ at Eidolon 6. Now, QQ definitely is a bit of an RNG fiesta, but I have seen her pull off some pretty crazy shenanigans as well. So when considering future characters and DPSs specifically, I definitely look for ones which have an AoE component to them, and if they don't, I'd definitely be waiting a little bit to see how they perform in the endgame if you're looking for that omnipotent juggernaut that can smash as a solo DPS. Now, I hope more than anybody that this isn't the way the game is going to go, load one guy up and sweep the world, but that definitely does seem the way it kind of goes right now. Alright, so our final destination on the meta-analysis train this time is going to be Silver Wolf, a character which many people consider a must-pull, the god of Honkai Star Rail, someone who is absolutely not one you want to miss. Now, I'm personally not of the opinion that she is that good, but I can definitely see why people are saying that. So we just discussed the scenario in which you get two guys and you load them up and boom, Hulk smash. And she definitely contributes to that playstyle. You can get the two strongest dudes and make them even stronger. And the cool thing about Silver Wolf is she enables that playstyle more than any other character currently in the game, because she can take your strongest dude and make it so that the enemy is weak to your strongest dude every single time. And you can essentially ignore the biggest hurdle the developers put in your way to make the game challenging. And she can absolutely do that. And that definitely does, in my opinion, make her a very good candidate for S+ tier, which a lot of people have her at, and I completely agree. And you can see here by the play rate, other people completely agree as well. And she definitely does feel like she is on the power level of a character like Seele. I definitely feel like she's gonna be that kind of a support which is gonna be sticking around for the most part long term. Now, anecdotally, when I play with Silver Wolf here, I can tell you that she definitely feels like a very strong unit when you're in the team building phase. When you're up against an enemy, you've got your main two guys, and you're like, damn, this guy is not weak to lightning and he's got a mechanic I really need to break. Well, Silver Wolf is the band-aid. You put her in, you structure the team around blocking, so it's always going to either implant quantum or lightning. Bing, bang, boom, you're in, and you can brute force it so much easier. And it's only going to get easier and easier and easier to create these scenarios for your most powerful DPS characters moving forward. And for the most part, I think we've identified already that DPS characters are probably the highest to be power crept, because there's 4 character paths that contribute to them, and they're also the characters that you need the least of. So if you can pull less of them and have to need less of them, that is a pretty big deal, and Silver Wolf definitely allows you to do that. So absolutely I can see why people consider her a must pull, but I don't think her power level is so high outside of what we just discussed. Her implant is obviously phenomenal, but the rest of her kit, while it is incredibly strong, I don't think it puts her in the kind of broken territory. Now, the exception to that rule is of course her Eidolons. They're very strong, but I definitely don't think her Eidolons are something you need. The character is mainly what we just talked about, and I think that definitely does really sum her up for the most part here. The ability to brute force unconditionally at all stages of the game for the foreseeable future is what she offers you, and it will definitely be very strong. So I definitely think her S+ tier rating here is justified. And do I think she's going to fall off in the future? Well, I don't really think so. And is the main question, which a lot of people ask, going to come to pass? So the main question people ask with Silver Wolf is, all right, so in a world in the future where I have 7 incredible 5-star characters, where there's 1 of each element, does Silver Wolf become useless? Well, you no longer are in a scenario where you can't bring your strongest dude because you've got 7 strongest dudes. Is there really any reason for Silver Wolf? Well, my counter argument to that would be, surely 1 of those 7 is going to be a little bit stronger because it was either released later and is subject to power creep, or is just, mechanically better. You already see that between Seele and Jing. People definitely have a pretty strong bias towards Seele. So I think there's going to be a power difference or a power rift in between those 7 different elements. My next point is going to be, some of the elements are just straight up better than other elements. Quantum, namely, is insane offensively and defensively, so I think quantum units just have a bit of an edge, so you'd rather use quantum guys over other guys if they are at an equal power level, so you can kind of choose and pick and choose between the elements you want to use. And of course, finally, I have a point here that Silver Wolf, even in the worst case scenario, can implant an additional weakness that your main carry is not, and allow you to break even more with your supports. Like, you could implant fire and use fire main character, even though you've already got the quantum weakness covered from your main carry that might be Seele. So she definitely has a lot of utility even outside of that, so I definitely think her S+ tier rating is justified. Now, the question a lot of people have is, okay, well, that's great. Should I pull her then? If you were going to pull a character which had an impact on the overall trajectory of your account over months and maybe years, I think Silver Wolf would definitely be one of those characters, because she does allow you to kind of forego having to build one side of your Memory of Chaos team as much if you are able to achieve a solid team of a single single element, or at least 50-50. Now, what I mean by that is you could have a quantum like Silverwolf and a quantum healer, and then have like a lightning support and like a lightning damage dealer, like Tingyun and a lightning damage dealer. And that would give you a very good spread and a good chance to implant either quantum, which will allow you to break with Silverwolf, or lightning and break with the lightning characters that you have. And I think that scenario is probably the most realistic, and it is what I think Silverwolf is best at. So while she isn't a must pull, in my opinion, she definitely does have a lot of value, and comparing her to, you know, just another DPS, I definitely think she is more valuable than just another DPS, unless that DPS is so mechanically broken and powerful that they are, you know, kind of like game warping. But I don't think we've seen one of those yet. They might be coming, but I'm not fully aware of who or when they might be coming. So yeah. All right, that pretty much rounds out my coverage, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely let me know down below, because I'm always interested in how you guys are finding the content. If you guys enjoyed it, definitely hit the thumbs up button and let me know. And until next time, hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, cheers.